if none of this can be resolved, at least in the short term, if Collision is launched on June 17th without CM Punk, if there are issues, if those issues are not resolved in time in about a month, what does Collision look like? I think Meltzer's analysis of it's a show essentially booked around CM Punk's star power to get viewers. Not to say that there's some of the talent announced on that show, fantastic. Samoa Joe, Powerhouse Hobbs, Miro, Andrade, huge fans of them all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Punk was supposed to be the cornerstone of that show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And without Punk there, especially if they even entertain the idea of having the debut episode in Chicago, Collision's going to air on Saturday evening in prime time. It's not the weekday in prime time is what you really want. Saturday night's not a good time for programming. Most people are at the bar.
Yeah.
At the club or in line for the club. Having a late dinner.
Karaoke.
Socializing.
Karaoke.
Touching grass, if you will.
Touching grass, ideally.
Yes. So, if Collision launches with no CM Punk, and it seems crystal clear there's not going to be CM Punk, what does that mean for the immediate future of AEW Collision?
So here's what I've been thinking about this, man. And here's what you got to plan to move on without him. And I came up with this idea, and I don't know if it would work, but what is the show that everybody is comparing Collision to visually, aesthetically, whatever?
Nitro.
Correct. How did Nitro get its major success?
First episode at the mall.
Well, yeah. So maybe you do the first episode of Collision at Mall of America.
Pasta Mania commercial right in the middle of the show.
Well, that's also definitely a possibility. I'm not sure how many wrestling restaurant integrations there are these days, but no, what I was thinking of, Lex Luger, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, they took a bunch of names that made their name in WWF and they brought them over to WCW and they gave them new life based off of partial nostalgia. It hadn't been that long since they were big names, and that's what they ran with. Now, what has AEW been accused of doing? Running big with former WWE names. So you take the same philosophy. You take the Blackpool Combat Club. Now that Punk's not on Collision, you bring those guys. Those three names right there alone. Mox, not Yuta. Mox, Danielson, Claudio, former WWE guys. Jericho Appreciation Society. You bring them to Collision. And you sort of look, those are good names. Those are really good names. You put them on Collision, and that's sort of your former WWE. They already got Andrade and Samoa Joe there. Your former WWE guy show, right? Miro, great example. So you put those guys on Collision, and Dynamite remains the sort of PWG New Japan, indie darling show that, with Orange Cassidy on there, does pretty well just with those guys. MJF is on both shows because you got the big, 2024 bidding war. Well, he's so special. He gets to be on both shows because I think he's been proven to be a draw. He's a compelling character. He's your champion. So that's your brand split right there. Look, regardless of it's now or a year from now, you got to plan to move on without Punk because how much longer can he last? I mean, I just don't see it with him. He's 44 years old. He's not getting any younger because sadly time doesn't work that way. And, he busted his foot diving into the crowd. He busted his triceps doing a suicide dive. I don't think the guy's going to change his wrestling style. And he ain't getting no younger. And I don't know what he can give you anymore. Can he give you 6 months? Can he give you a year? I really find it difficult to believe he can give you 3 sustained years. So if the idea is he's going to be our star for the first 6 months or the first year to get it off the ground, I get that. But you're going to have to plan for a time post-Punk anyways. I say that you make Collision the true successor to Nitro. You get the former WWE guys there, and Dynamite is what you built AEW on in the first place, which is all those great indie names and New Japan names and PWG names.
I'd actually suggest this getting rid of the concept of the brand split entirely.
Sure.
If there's wrestlers who have enjoyed the schedule they've been working, working Wednesdays or working, one day a week, whatever the case may be, you could try your best to schedule the shows so few talents, at least few of your marquee talents, are on both shows, if that's an issue. And if there's issue with people getting along backstage, well, you could still arrange the roster without necessarily doing a hard brand split. So, one party is on one show predominantly while the other's on the other show predominantly. And that way you don't have to worry about one show lacking star power at the expense of, or having star power at the expense of the other. I mean, as we saw last night, people were super into this Elite Blackpool Combat Club angle.
Oh, it's great. I can't wait to talk about it because it's really good. Yeah.
It's been really good. You know, and if the idea that you're having a brand split to satisfy people who don't get along, well, if one of the individuals that doesn't get along with the Elite's not going to be around, why don't you put the Elite on occasion on Collision? There's no reason not to.
Well,
if they're going to bring eyeballs to that show.
You know, there's also a matter of, and I'm sure this would have existed anyways. However, I do think that if all parties in AEW are interested in building AEW, and there isn't this one element that seems to be a divisive personality, if there's not there, because we haven't heard anybody, I mean, okay, Sammy Guevara and Andrade, right? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
But like beyond that, in terms of the big names, Jericho and Mox have always worked great together.
Yeah.
Jericho and Kenny and Mox seem to love each other.
Yeah.
There seems to be, Cole likes everybody.
Yeah.
There seems to be, without Punk, not a lot of people who don't get along.
Yeah.
And if you did separate the brands, let's just go back to my scenario really quick.
Sure.
There could be that like healthy competition between the two brands to just try to one up each other, even if you split the creative teams like WWE did back in the day. Mm-hmm. There could be that sort of healthy competition where they are actively, in a positive way, trying to one up each other week to week, which could be a lot of fun. But also, to your point, I don't think it's a bad one. Tony Khan is he's got that big ass crinkly piece of paper where he's scheduling up. You can stagger the talents across both brands to maximize the idea of everybody gets to be featured, and you get the biggest names on both shows in a staggered way that actually does take advantage of your roster. And I feel like if anybody could pull that, could pull that off, it might be Tony Khan, who, you know, seems to like to book week to week. He's got a whiteboard or whatever. Maybe that kind of thing could work with a big analytics guy. But in any event, dude, I think the bottom line is you have the talent there. It's one guy. And I understand he's a draw, and to many people, he's a compelling character, but you have to plan for a day where he's not there. And that day is either now or it's 6 months to a year from now, because he ain't getting any younger.
Yeah. Yep. That's true. That is true.
So, yeah.
I had another point, but then I forgot what it was. So I guess we can move on.
All right.